Drop a Y in the chat if you've ever worked with a client whose challenging behavior increased after you put a treatment plan in place. I feel like if you haven't, it's just a matter of time. Like I'm pretty sure all of us have experienced that situation. And oftentimes some people will say, oh, it's just an extinction burst, or, it has to get worse before it gets better kind of stuff. But in reality, we're probably unintentionally making the situation worse. And we have better tools available to us now than existed, 40, 50 years ago. So learning about all of this information and putting that into practice doesn't mean we won't ever have that situation arise, but it definitely cuts down on that probability and hopefully decreases how often we're experiencing that situation. And then lastly, it allows us to align with trauma-informed or trauma-assumed and assent-based practices. I'm curious, no judgment or anything, but how many people in here would say that you're currently practicing in ways that are focused on incorporating an understanding of trauma and assent? You can put yes or no. It's not, there's no judgment. It's totally fine if you're not. I'm not gonna criticize you or anything. Okay, interesting. I was at a conference the past week, and it seemed like a lot of folks there, it was very interesting, didn't yet have, like, everyone we asked was like, what are you talking about? So it was very interesting to me that was like, I live in my online do better bubble, and it's like, oh, everyone's doing that now, but clearly it wasn't, and that's fine. Like I know that not everyone has exposure to the same information. And then I saw a few people in here were saying, they're trying to, or they want to, but where they are doesn't allow it and things like that. So, all right. Just a little table to kind of summarize the difference between neuroscience and neurobiology. I like to make tables. Allison, who's on here, knows I'm not very good with visuals, so this is what you get, but hopefully it's still helpful. And Allison, you can make notes of which things you're going to help me fix. So behavioral neuroscience, again, investigates how brain structures, chemicals, and systems influence observable behavior. So questions we might ask with behavioral neuroscience is, how does the amygdala influence fear-based responses? What role does the vagus nerve play in social engagement? And how does chronic stress affect learning and memory? And this is relevant to ABA when we're looking at how the internal brain-body states impact our behavior. So regulation, engagement, reactivity. And then for behavioral neurobiology, we're focusing more on those biological mechanisms. So looking at genetics, neurotransmitters, and cellular processes. So questions we might ask in this is, what biological systems trigger that fight, flight, and freeze response? How do hormones like cortisol or oxytocin influence our approach or avoidance behavior? And what are the cellular responses to trauma? We're definitely not talking about the cellular responses to trauma today. I wish we were, but it's a fascinating area of research. I don't know how many of you have looked at epigenetics and the research that's been done on even just looking at for genes being turned on and off, and the effects of trauma can get passed down through generations. So it's very interesting. Unfortunately, we don't have time to talk about it today. Relevant to ABA when you're considering what biological processes underlying stress, sensory overwhelm, or social bonding, and how they might interact with reinforcement contingencies. Before we dive in and looking at some of the key terms or key concepts that I'm want to lay the groundwork for, because the rest of the workshop pulls in this information. Does anyone have questions about neuroscience versus the behavioral neuroscience versus behavioral neurobiology? Yes, great point. There's a comment in the chat that says many of our clients are also on medications, and a basic understanding of the psychopharmacological, I can't speak with that word for some reason, is also important in understanding the neurobiology. And there is a section on the checklist that ties in both of those as well. I'm not, again, an expert on psychopharmacology, couldn't even say the word earlier, but there are folks in the field who are doing research on that, and I've attended some really wonderful presentations about it as well. All right, the brain's role in behavior, just a quick overview. I had to make a decision how much I was going to lean, because again, if any of you have seen anything about neuroscience, there's so many different topics that we could talk about.